Welcome, welcome, welcome to Audubon After Dark. My name is Keith Bruno, and I am a community naturalist with Audubon Rockies. I'm based, as you can see in the chat room, I am based in Pacosa Springs, Colorado. Please, if you're just joining us, jump in on chat and let us know where you're joining in from tonight. Um, I have two coworkers also with me tonight. That is Jacqueline Downey and Zach Hutchinson, who are both in Wyoming. So we are the naturalist team. Yeah, you can wave at Zach and Jacqueline. Those guys are both in Wyoming. I'm in Colorado, and we are the community naturalist team with Audubon Rockies. And so we're thrilled that you guys joined us tonight. We have some special guests, and we like to believe that we've kept you guys guessing. If you've been sitting in on some of these after dark sessions, then we'd like to believe that we're keeping you guessing on what we might do next. We've done trivia. Traditionally, we've done a lot of trivia. For those of you who've been on the trivia sessions, you know how wonderful Zach's trivia is. And so that's been a lot of fun, and we've had a great response to that. And then we started adding some storytelling into it around various bird-related subjects. And so we've had some great guest bird storytellers or storytellers at large. And tonight we decided to mix it up a little bit more, and we invited some friends of ours from Tracy Aviary in Salt Lake City. And so tonight we are really grateful to have Shea Baumgarth and Erin Johnson with us from Tracy Aviary in Salt Lake City. And so a couple things, I'm gonna let them introduce themselves to you guys here in just a moment. But as folks continue to kind of come on to the program, let us know where you're from, where you're attending from. And if you could just make sure that you're muted so that we don't distract our speakers tonight. They've got some special things to share with us, some videos. They're going to tell you more about what Tracy Aviary is and what Tracy Aviary does on the regular, and a little bit about themselves and how they ended up in their respective roles. Jacqueline, is there anything I'm missing on the introductory side of things?
I don't think so. Welcome everyone. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm really excited to learn from Erin and Shea, and I'm glad that you all could join us. So welcome.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So we're got some great things in store here, so we don't want to hold you up too long. Zach, anything on your end that you needed to mention? Feel like we're good to go?
I just wanted to mention that that beautiful intro music you heard tonight as you joined the meeting was written and performed by Keith Bruno, the person who's been speaking to you this whole time.
Thank you, Zach. I appreciate that. Yeah, we've had fun with this. This was born out of a conversation between Zach and Jacqueline and I, where we said, you know, what can we do to bring in new audiences, perhaps new or perhaps audiences who know about Audubon but maybe aren't involved in our membership. What are some gaps in our educational programming? And so, you know, we said, well, you know, everybody loves a good trivia night, and that's really where it was born. Was really with Zach's trivia. And then if any of you are familiar with the podcast named The Moth, we were all inspired by some of the folks that do some of the storytelling behind those types of programs. And some of our colleagues in National Audubon, we can't claim the storytelling idea because they were already running a very similar program. And we've made it into our own, and we've had a good time. So there's a number of you who have joined us for several programs. So keep coming back. We really appreciate you guys. And you know, we're just going to continue to make it interesting, different subject matter around birds. So keep staying with us each month. We'll be doing this through May. Jacqueline, is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Shea and Erin, let them introduce themselves and tell you about Tracy Aviary. So let us know if you have any questions in the chat. We'll do our best to answer. Once these guys have presented, they're going to show us some videos, again, and a presentation at large. But after that, we're going to have some time to open it up to you guys one at a time, and we'll do some questions and answers. So if you guys have questions about some of their birds, or some of their work, that'll be your turn to chat. So we appreciate you being good listeners in the meantime. Thank you so much. Shea, I'll turn it over to you and Erin.
Great. Thank you so much, Keith, for that introduction, both musical and spoken. It was great. I'll go ahead and share my screen to start our introductions. Let's see. Sorry, one sec.
No worries.
There we go. All right. Here's our bird show and tell. It's good to see that some of you in the comments are Salt Lake and Utah locals. So hopefully some of you are familiar with us at Tracy Aviary and have been to visit. And for anyone who isn't, we're excited to tell you all about it. My name is Erin. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the school and OST programs coordinator at Tracy Aviary. So I'm part of the education team. And I'll let Shea introduce herself.
I'm Shea. I am one of the aviculturists at the aviary. So that means I'm basically just a bird zookeeper. So I get to hang out with these guys and kind of take care of them.
Sweet. Cool. So before Shea tells you all the good stuff about our individual birds and all their quirks, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about what the heck Tracy Aviary is. So what is Tracy Aviary? So our mission is to inspire curiosity and caring for birds and nature through education and conservation. Some lofty goals. We are the largest and oldest of only 2 freestanding aviaries in the nation. So some zoos have aviaries as part of them, but we are a special bird-only zoo, and we're only one of 2 aviaries in the nation, which is pretty cool. We've evolved a lot over our 80+ year history, to the point where now we're a cultural landmark, as well as a public garden and a leader in environmental education and conservation regionally. So we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we're located in the Noah or Shoshone-Goshu and Nuchu or Ute territories. And the state of Utah that we're located within is named after the Utah Shoshone peoples, and also includes Noavi or Paiute and Dene or Navajo territories. The Salt Lake Valley, where we're located, is known in the Noah language as Sunkani, which means many houses. So we operate in Sunkani. We operate actually 2 locations. So our aviary in Liberty Park in downtown Salt Lake City is where all of our 150+ species of birds are located. And then we also have a newer campus called the Jordan River Nature Center, which is in South Salt Lake, right along the Jordan River, which we don't have any birds in human care there. We're focused on the natural ecology and conservation of the river and surrounding ecosystems. So 2 different campuses, but one really important mission. Yeah, so we're a leader in conservation. We engage a diverse community in our area and data collection, which informs restoration and stewardship within our region. Okay. And then a little word on our origins. We were founded in 1938 on the previous site of the Salt Lake City Zoo. We opened to the public on July 2nd, 1938 as a 4-acre facility, not only home to several hundred birds, but other animals, including seals, monkeys, and kangaroos. Before we opened to the public, the birds at Tracy Aviary were actually part of a personal collection that was owned by a banker named Russell Lord Tracy. He collected and displayed all his exotic birds in the yard of his home in Salt Lake City, which if you're a local, it was up in the avenues. And as his collection became more popular, he realized that he needed a more public location for his birds to be viewed. We can only imagine the complaints that the neighbors had about all the loud and flamboyant birds in the front yard. So he works with the city then to designate a portion of our downtown Liberty Park, which had previously been home to the Salt Lake Zoo, to serve as the new aviary. And then he donated his entire collection to the city for, quote unquote, the enjoyment, entertainment, and education of Salt Lake City's children. So it's for the children. And he stayed involved in the aviary until he died in 1945. So that's how we have this lovely piece of land. It's changed a lot over the years. But we're, thankful to Mr. Tracy. Okay, so what happens at Tracy Aviary? We have, like I said, we have over 150 species, and I believe over 300 individual birds in our care that you can come and visit. You can see in our exhibits, but beyond that, we also offer nose to beak experiences with these birds. So showed here in this slide is a lorikeet feeding. You can see the little bird climbing up on her shoulder there. And then we also have bird shows where our bird show team does an amazing show of all our trained birds, and they also come around the grounds as ambassador birds, so you can meet them there as well. And then of course, my home at the aviary is in education programs, so field trips, tours, camps, scout programs, all that sort of thing. And it's really a privilege getting to work with these kids and see them make connections to the birds in our care and to the wider ecosystems that we share with those birds. So that's a little bit about Tracy Aviary. I'm going to turn it over to Shea so that she can tell you about all the cool birds that she gets to work with face to face.
Cool. I'm going to talk about 3 different species, and these guys are all in our exhibits. So they're not necessarily in bird shows, but they're ones you can kind of see around grounds. I'm going to start with these guys. They're called hooded pittas. They're personally one of my favorite species we have at the aviary. They're actually a subspecies of a western hooded pitta. The main difference just being in their head feather coloration. So the western hooded pitta actually have this nice little brown cap on the top of their head, whereas these guys don't. So these guys are going to be native to southeastern Asian islands, such as Malaysia and Borneo, and a couple others. And these guys at the aviary are actually located at our Treasures of the Rainforest building. So it's this really large free flight and mixed species exhibit. Super cool. Again, one of my favorite exhibits as well. So these guys are a little harder to find in there. They like to kind of hang out on the ground. They're insectivores as well, which is kind of why they're on the ground. They're looking for the different bugs and insects they can find down there. And something we often hear in that exhibit is going to be their call. And that actually is this loud, piercing call. It can just be a normal vocalization, but it's also heard in breeding as well. Erin, if you wanted to play that video on the bottom right. If that sound is going through, I'm not sure. It is basically just this loud chirp, and it gets paired with kind of a elongation movement. So they stand up nice and straight when they do that, and a lot of times the males typically do that more frequently than the females. The one in that video actually is our female. Her name, it's a nice pun, her name is Brad Pitta. She, as you might have seen in that video, she actually only has 1 foot. She actually had an injury to one of her feet, and then it had to be amputated, unfortunately, but she still gets around great. And she kind of hangs out. She kind of runs the show in there. She is very bossy and likes to demand bugs whenever we're in there. So, and then we also have our male. He's going to be kind of in that top left corner. We also call him Mr. Brad or Tall Brad, just because he likes to do that elongated positioning to kind of signal to Brad that he's ready to hang out with her and mate. And Brad is 6 and our male is only 5. On average, these guys typically only live around 3 years, but in captivity, they can live up into their teens. And the oldest recorded actually was 22. So we like to say these guys are pretty young and have a long life ahead of them. So as you can see from some of these pictures, these guys build pretty intense nests. Males and females will both collect nesting material. As you might be able to tell from Mr. Brad's picture up there in the corner, he definitely is more intense about collecting material. And then if you play the video in the center, that's also him putting in some hard work, lifting up a leaf a little bit larger than himself. So again, typically males will collect most of the nesting material. He's actually going to get ready to hop up there in a second, kind of take it to a nest, which is kind of hidden in a corner. So their nest, as you can see, is just a bunch of sticks and leaves, and they'll actually find that in their exhibit. We don't typically supply them with anything, so they'll kind of go about and forage for that on their own. We do try to give them things, but they don't always enjoy our things. They like to be very picky about what they choose. So it creates a nice little dome, and then they have that nice little opening for themselves. It keeps it nice and dark in there, and it also warm, which is really important for incubating their eggs. Typically after their nest is done being built, which takes a couple of days, our pittas are a little slower than some in the wild, so they take a little closer to a couple of weeks. They're very picky about their materials, like I said. So they, as soon as the nest is complete, the female will lay the eggs, and then they start incubating, and they incubate for about 17 days, and then from there, we either will have them hatch on exhibit, so we will have where the parents raise them, or we will hand raise them ourselves. And there's a couple different reasons we do that. It kind of depends on the species, but for these guys, depends on kind of their situation. So there's a couple of different benefits to having parent-raised chicks. So they're going to be able to kind of pick up on those behaviors they need for survival. So obviously they're not in the wild, so there's not any sort of natural predator or anything in that sort of sense, but foraging for food, kind of going about their normal bird habits, and then also nutrition based. So when they're getting food directly from the parents, they provide a lot of nutrition within their body that we can't necessarily supply them. So they're getting a lot of good antibodies and things to kind of help fight different diseases and that sort of thing. So that's one of the benefits to keeping them with the parents when they hatch. Another option is to replace them with something we call dummy eggs, which is basically a small little version of their eggs that we fill with plaster. So they're little fake eggs, so we call them dummy eggs. And then we'll actually take the eggs and we'll bring them to a artificial incubator, which keeps them nice and warm as well. And then from there, they'll hatch and we will kind of take on the feeding and that sort of thing as well. And some benefits of that is we do have a little bit more control. Like I said, they don't have any natural predators, but we do have some very curious birds in this exhibit. So it kind of protects them from that sort of thing as well. We can kind of monitor their weight a little bit better. With chicks, it's really important to monitor their weight and kind of their daily increase. It's really good for them to develop pretty quickly. And then also the food that's offered. So despite the fact that the parents can offer a lot of nutritional, good nutritional food for them, we actually have had instances of parents bringing chicks things they shouldn't necessarily be eating. And sometimes that is just adults will know when something is wrong with the chick and they won't necessarily feed it to succeed. So we can kind of control that a little bit better. But either way, after the end of their incubation period or after the chicks fledge, they kind of leave the nest. They will actually continue to dismantle the nest and then move their location and start building another one. And then the whole process kind of starts over again. Well, we can talk about our next species, which is going to be our...
In the chat, someone asked to see the Brad video again. We'll see if the sound comes out. I don't know if it will, but at least you get to see how beautiful she is.
There we go.
Did you hear it?
Yeah, I can hear that. So like I said, that call is just a little bit louder from the males, and then they'll do like a long stretching behavior. That's kind of like a breeding interest behavior that they'll do.
Cool. All right.
Next species is our southern ground hornbills. These guys are also one of my favorites. I'm pretty biased. I get to work with these guys daily. Like I said, one of my favorites. They're actually a species from South Africa. And they're one of only two ground hornbill species. So all the other species are going to be mostly arboreal, whereas these guys are primarily on the ground. So they do like to kind of hang out in the trees, but most of the time they're hunting on the ground and that sort of thing as well. And they're going to be carnivorous, so they will hunt for, a lot of times they really like snakes and small prey. Sometimes they will hunt together in groups, but typically their favorite thing to do is look for bugs. So they're actually specially adapted to look for bugs. So one of the ways they do that is through bill striking. So a lot of times they'll break down various insect mounds and things like that with their beaks. So you can't quite tell necessarily from these closest pictures, but you can see kind of on the right, they have that nice long beak and it's really, really strong. So they actually can break open a tortoise shell with that. So that's how strong it is. But they'll use that for bill striking, like I said, or digging. So they're going to be digging through the dirt and the mud to kind of pick out insects. Definitely their favorite, even what we offer them, their insects take precedent over everything else. These guys also have really interesting family dynamics. So in the wild, they're going to live in groups from 2 to 10 individuals, but on average it's around 4. And the males who are hatched within a group will actually stick around past their sexual maturity to kind of help raise other offspring. Whereas the females, once they reach sexual maturity, they will be kicked out of the group, because in these groups, they have a primary breeding male and a primary breeding female. And the female is actually the dominant one in the group. So the males stick around, but the females get kicked out and they kind of go create their own group. So then our individuals, they're all pictured here. In the bottom right corner, that's going to be Weiner. He's our oldest. He's actually 40 years old. He is our primary male. He's been our primary breeding male for about 20 years. So he kind of knows what he's doing. He is actually Epic stat. Epic's going to be in the top left corner. And like I said, he is Weiner's son, and he's only 10 years old. So the males will actually kind of take on the primary breeding role around 10 years old. So he's kind of stepping into that position. And we're kind of encouraging him to breed with our female Elle. She's going to be on the bottom there. She is 16 years old, and she's our primary female. And you can tell the males and females apart because of that nice little patch underneath their beak. The females have what we call like a nice little blue bow tie underneath, whereas the males have either no spotting or like a little bit of spotting. Weiner definitely has more spotting than anyone else. These guys in captivity can actually live up to 70 years. So we like to say that Weiner's middle age, even though a lot of times he does surprise people with how old he is. And something that's really cool with these guys is because they're such high and active birds, they are very curious. So we actually use that to our advantage when it comes to training and things like that. So the keeper there in the center, she actually developed hornbill paintings. So it's a trained behavior, and definitely Epic is our most interested bird in terms of participating. So that's going to be him mostly in those photos. So we'll set up a nice canvas underneath, and then we let guests kind of pick some colors that they like. When we set up that nice contraption, we'll hang that paintbrush there, and then we'll dip it in some paint, and then he brushes across the canvas, and then he gets a reward. So basically, he'll just swing the brush, and he only gets rewarded for good swings, so he can't just tap it. But he does a really good job. And then you can kind of see Elle up there in that top corner photo. She's doing her signature, which is just their footprint that gets put on there at the end. So not only is this stimulating for them, we can kind of transfer this to other behaviors as well. So training isn't only just for fun for us and the guests, it's also very enriching for these birds. So couple different types. There's this fun painting behavior. We also do touch training. This was kind of developed with Weiner because he had a lot of high stress when we would catch him for veterinary procedures. So basically what this behavior allowed us to do was restrain him in a way that's less stressful for him. And then also there's station training where we can kind of point to an area we want them to go to, and then they get a reward for going there. And in that way, it's kind of nice to be able to see them a little closer, so we can kind of check up on them without having to get them in hand, which, like I said, can sometimes be stressful for these guys. As I mentioned, Weiner is our primary breeding male. However, Epic is kind of transferring into being our primary. He's still learning the ropes. We did have a successful egg lay last year, just unfortunately didn't hatch. So these guys are kind of developing their relationship. So there's a lot of family bonding that occurs within the group. So Weiner and Epic still share a pretty strong bond. There's a lot of food sharing. So they'll actually grab whatever we have for them in terms of price. Sometimes it's mice, sometimes it's chicks, and they'll offer it to each other. So that's something that they'll also do in courtship. So in terms of bonding, a lot of times the males will bring the females various prey items within their nest. So I saw a really good sign this morning when I was working with these guys. I saw Epic bring Elle a nice mouse this morning. So we're seeing some good signs. So we're hoping to have a successful breeding season. These guys typically start their breeding in really early summer. So it's super early signs, which is good. It's just showing their bonding and kind of getting ready for that breeding season. And you can see in that bottom corner where Weiner is, that's actually one of their nest options. So that's actually the nest that Epic hatched in. They typically will hollow out trees or any sort of like large stump to kind of cavity nest. And like I said, that's the barrel that Epic actually hatched in. So that's definitely Weiner's favorite place to hang out. Cool. I think we're ready to move on to the next species.
There was a question about how do the female chicks escape the nest cavity after being sealed in? Maybe that was answered, but.
Oh, I did not see that. So they don't necessarily get sealed in. They're just kind of, they'll cave it out and there's still an opening. So they're not necessarily like trapped in there or anything. But they just won't leave once they get their eggs laid for the most part. And typically males and females will switch off, but it's primarily females that will incubate the egg. Hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, our last species I'm going to talk about is our Kia. These guys are definitely one of the staples of the aviary. They are a New Zealand alpine parrot, so they really love cold weather. They're the only true alpine parrot, which is also pretty interesting. So they are definitely the most active right now. They've been loving the snow we've been getting. They're definitely one of the only species that are enjoying it that much. But like the other day I walked by and they're kind of rolling around in the snow. So they definitely enjoy it. They're also known as clowns of the mountain. I've had some guests who have been from New Zealand actually, who have told me sometimes they can be quite a pain because they will just, there was one lady who told me there was like 20 on her car one morning when she went to leave. And I've had some other guests compare them to raccoons in terms of their foraging and kind of pillaging through things they probably shouldn't. So very fond discussion of them from people from New Zealand. But they have a lot of really cool adaptations. So you can kind of see from that photo on the bottom there, they have those really bright coloration under the wings. So that's going to be something that was adapted because most of their predators are going to be coming from above. So they have those nice bright colors underneath the wings to still kind of attract the other sex, that sort of thing. But they keep that nice green color on top so they're not being seen from above. They kind of blend in with their environment. And then they also have that really large upper mandible that they have. And that's really great for digging, which is actually how they'll nest. They'll dig their nest kind of into the ground and burrow in there. And similar to the hornbills, the males will actually bring the females food while they're nesting. That beak is also really important for grinding, which is something that they can do. It's also pretty unique for them. They can actually do not just an up and down movement, but kind of side to side. So it allows them to kind of grind things down. It's also why they're really good at manipulating a lot of different things. So their enrichment is always really complicated. So basically the toys and things we're going to give them, the puzzles they get for their food, we can make pretty complicated for them. And then we have 5 Kia. They're all under the age of 2, except for one of them is a little bit older. He's 6. I'll go through the names just because I do enjoy them and I think they're pretty fun. We have Dame Cooper, Tahi, Ruthie, Aura, and then Stone Cold Steve Austin, which I think is pretty fun. He's actually our oldest guy, but we are kind of set up for these guys as a matchmaking facility. So they live pretty long lives. These guys can live into their 40s and 50s. In captivity, in the wild, it's not quite as long. But in captivity, they can live for quite a while. So they bond with their mates at a young age. So that's kind of what our facility is set up for. So we haven't had a lot of success the past couple years. We did send off a couple recently to another facility to hopefully breed for us. But a lot of these guys, like I said, are pretty young. So we have some that are 2 and another one who's 1. And they're kind of getting into their sexual maturity. So they're kind of figuring that stuff out still. So like I said, hopefully we see some bonding between these guys, and then we can send them off and hopefully have some more Kia into the family. So another aspect for these guys, similar to the hornbills, they're going to be really active in terms of foraging and looking for food. So training is really important with these guys. So Erin, if you wanted to play that first video, this is something we utilize them. We utilize to get them inside when we need to service outside of the exhibit. They all have their own little station or stand that they go on. And then they use that picture right next to the video. They get treats kind of sent down that little chute. And that's some of our staff members kind of using, we were utilizing as many people as we could because like I said, there's 5 of these guys and they get pretty easily distracted. So kind of keeping everyone on there, making sure they're getting rewarded for that sort of thing. As they've kind of learned what they're supposed to be doing, we don't need quite as many people, but it still is fun to get to bring people into. And we're actually developing a guest experience to kind of get our guests involved, where they're going to kind of help us with shifting these guys around and getting to put out enrichment and things for that guy. So the puzzles they have for their food. And then we have some other training stuff that we do with these guys. So in that kind of middle to the right a little bit, there's a photo where we're looking for a microchip. So a lot of times these guys get microchipped when they're chicks. So that's us voluntary checking. So they get a reward after they kind of let us look them over and kind of scan them, that sort of thing. And then in that last video, there's actually a Kia getting voluntary medicated, which is really nice. He ended up, that's actually Steve Austin in that video, but he had some bacterial infection, so he was just getting some treatment for that. So he gets to take some medicine and then he gets a reward. So again, training is really great in terms of stimulating these guys, but it also helps us in terms of any sort of medical care that we need to do day to day. That's kind of my main topics about those guys.
Yeah, I have 2 questions.
Thank you.
One of them is, are any of these birds endangered in their natural habitat? And then another question for the Kias is it true that they can say their own name?
It's kind of, they are very, they are very loud. So it kind of depends. They have quite a few different vocalizations. And when they say it sounds like they're saying their name, it's kind of, sounds kind of like it, but it's more just it sounds a lot like screaming, kind of, is what it sounds like. You could get the name out of it if you wanted to.
Yeah, they go Kya!
Yeah.
But they are named after the sound that they make. So Kia is their, or I think it's Kia. I don't know how it's pronounced, but it's their indigenous name because of the sound that they make.
Gotcha. And then in terms of being endangered, under the I think it's IUCN qualifications, the hooded pittas are under least concern, whereas southern ground hornbills are vulnerable, and then the Kia are under threatened. So in terms of population, I'm pretty sure our Kia are one of the ones who have the lowest population in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think both those species, right, have species survival plans that you work with other AZA institutions.
Yeah, so our Kia and our Southern Ground Hornbills actually both have breeding programs within zoos with the species survival plan, basically just to keep track of their population genetics within the populations in zoos. And then we get recommendations to send birds to other facilities to create the most genetic diversity within the species that we have within zoos.
Yeah, and I think both of the species, it's due to habitat threats.
Yes, I believe so, like deforestation for the pittas for sure. And then I believe the hornbills are interesting because they actually will occasionally be hunted. There's some cultures who see them kind of as a bad omen. They're also known as a thunderbird because of their vocalization. They have this like loud booming call that they'll do. It's kind of like a territorial call. A lot of times they'll have like a chorus within their family group within the morning. It's basically to kind of announce their territory, that sort of thing. So yeah, sometimes they're seen as like a bad omen. And so for some reasons they're hunted for that. But in other cultures, they're seen as a good omen. They're also known as the rain bird. So they'll bring rain. So sometimes they're a good omen. So it just kind of depends on what culture you look at. Cool.
All right, and then I've got a little slide here. If you're interested in learning more or getting involved with our work at Tracy Aviary, there's opportunities to volunteer, to be a member, to donate. We're a nonprofit, so we love getting help. We love our volunteers. Yeah, and I can send those over as well if y'all are interested to send out after the meeting.
So there is a question about where do your birds generally come from?
So it kind of depends on the species. Sometimes there are private breeders in terms of waterfowl is typically where we get those most of the time. Whereas some are from rehab centers. So most of our American white pelican flock is actually rehab birds. And then other times it's just switching with other zoos in terms of their breeding programs. So it does kind of depend on the species and kind of the circumstance. A lot of times we typically will have rehab birds of native species, but not outside of that for the most part.
Yeah, I would say a lot of our like wetland species and our owls are rehabbed birds, and then some of the more like international species are from other zoos.
Okay.
We got a question when it comes to the hornbills. If I heard correctly, is a son being bred with its mother? Is there any worry of inbreeding?
No, sorry, that was Elle is actually not related to Epic. She came in from another facility. Unfortunately, Epic's mom passed away a couple years after Epic had hatched. So she's unfortunately not around anymore. So Elle is not related. Weiner is the one that's related to Epic only. And then there was another one, I think.
About the birds in the rainforest enclosure, do you add live bugs for them to eat and forage to find, or what's your?
Yeah, so they actually get 3 bug tosses a day. So they'll get some in the morning and then midday and then in the afternoon. We do also, because it's a very moist environment with it being a rainforest, there is occasionally slugs that they'll find that they like to eat and that sort of thing. But typically the mealworms that we give them are kind of their favorite.
Yeah. That's one of the things that Shea and I get to collaborate on sometimes because our summer campers get to participate in bug toss sometimes and get to join the keepers in throwing the bugs to the birds. So that's a fun way to get them involved.
So it was a not a question, but a statement was that that person was excited to come out this spring to visit, which leads to, are there any sort of events or things that you would like to highlight that will be coming up in the next couple of months that could boost these folks who are on this call to maybe come and visit?
Yeah, we have our Birds and Bees event that's coming up. I believe it's February 8th, so it's kind of early. But it is a chance where we talk about all types of bird breeding. It is a little bit more raunchy, so definitely not a kids event. But it's pretty fun. We do a lot of different games and discussions, and there's a lot of presentations as well that are pretty cool. And the decorations I've heard are going to be very good as well.
Yeah.
Great.
And if you haven't visited our Jordan River Nature Center yet, I also encourage you to check out our Nature Center location. We have events going on there all the time as well. Weekly nature walks, different clubs, book clubs, cultural groups use it for different events. So check out our website for that as well.
Wonderful. Well, we can open it up to any sort of questions anyone has for Erin and Shea. Any questions you're dying to know about birds at the aviary? Maybe you have a favorite bird and you're curious if they have that bird on display. I think I saw the Andean, is it a vulture or a condor? I forget.
Yeah, he's the condor.
Condor. Oh my goodness. So majestic and amazing.
Yeah.
That was when I visited, one of my favorites to see.
Another thing that I was checking out online, I was looking at pictures, was those elaborate nests that is it the metallic starlings make out of raffia. I was kind of reveling in those. Those are amazing.
Yeah, they enjoy weaving. It's actually pretty interesting. We have there's 4, and they're actually all females. So they won't necessarily lay any eggs, but they do enjoy weaving the nests, and they'll actually create different chambers within the nests where they can each kind of go and they would lay their eggs.
Wow, so no males on site, but the females will do that regardless. That's unbelievable.
Yeah,
Wow.
and they build it kind of in the center of the free flight too, so it's a really good centerpiece for the Treasures of the Rainforest exhibit as well.
Very cool. Very cool. Wow. Yeah, folks, feel free to you can either put your name in the chat if you want to ask a question. That's probably the easiest way to do this. So feel free to, we've got another 10 to 15 minutes. So if folks have some more questions, we can certainly entertain them. I was also noticing, Shea and Erin, that so you guys have, all these water features, and it looks like some of them are just, they're completely open. So you get wild birds flying in, like white pelicans. I saw a bunch of pictures of white pelicans coming in. So do they are they like, oh yeah, we're going to Tracy Aviary. We know there's gonna be tons of food for us right there. Do they like zero in on coming to the site?
Kind of, we do have so we're located within a park, so there is also a park pond, which a lot of times we will get the species. I don't know if we've had in a couple of years be any wild American white pelicans on our pond, but they will be in the neighboring pond. The species we see the most are mallards for sure, which we do have a couple kind of cool features that keepers have created to kind of keep them from eating our ducks' food. So on our big pond with the pelicans, there's actually a diving feeder. So all of the ducks on that pond are diving ducks. So there's 2 chambers. Basically, there's one that the ducks dive into, and then they'll swim across, and all of their food is in there. So it's kind of a way to keep the mallards from eating all our food. So we make sure that our birds are getting fed. And then
yeah, we have quite a few mallards right now. They like us in the winter.
Yeah, for sure. I think there were some more questions.
Yeah, that's a good question. So how many species total and from where? I don't know if you have a current estimate, but usually we average around 150 species, but we're constantly like trading around with other zoos to keep the populations healthy. So it fluctuates. And from where? I don't know how many like countries that are
countries specifically. But I think besides Antarctica, I think we have some that would be, well, and the Arctic. I don't think we have any Arctic birds either.
Well, we have a Caspian tern,
That's true.
which migrates through those regions,
Yeah.
close to those regions.
So from all over, unfortunately, it can't get much more specific.
Yeah. So the aviary is divided into exhibits roughly based on geographic location. So we have like rainforest birds, South American pavilion, Argentina. There's like a wading birds, and then
Yeah.
African.
Yeah, and Australian, and then they're kind of grouped in with the Kia and
So from all over. And then what is the admission fee? That's a great question. I think right now it is, we just raised it $1. What is it?
I think it's 14, like 55 or 95. I can't remember the end.
Around 14 for this and 11 for children, I think.
And then in terms of being closed, we're only closed on Thanksgiving and Christmas. Otherwise, it's just due to weather that we would be closed. Otherwise, we are open every day of the year. I feel like our rarest species would probably be our Guam kingfisher. They're actually a species that's extinct in the wild, so we do have a pair in our Treasures of the Rainforest building, and we're hoping to get some good breeding going with them this year. We had some eggs last year, but we're hoping to get a little further this year. How did we start painting? There are a couple other birds that paint. I know in our bird show program, they have a macaw who paints, and I think a couple others. I think they also have a crow who paints. They basically started, it was kind of an idea because of those other birds that painted, and the keeper just kind of wanted to see if they were interested at all in that sort of thing. Like I said, the hornbills are pretty into bugs. So just to get them to touch it, and then they get a reward and kind of building it up from there. So getting them used to the structure, like in the slideshow is like that PVC pipe. So kind of getting them used to that, and then kind of getting them interested in touching the paintbrush, getting a reward for that. And then they get rewarded for swinging the paintbrush and kind of building it up from there. Cool. I think that was all the questions in the chat.
Yeah, a new one came in, but just I did put the email or the emails, the website for Tracy Aviary, which is just Tracy Aviary, in the chat. So if you have questions about hours or how to get there, I would start with that. But now there's another few questions that just came in for you too.
I actually am very new to birding. I didn't originally, when I was going into zookeeping, know that I wanted to work with birds. I was kind of focused on other species, and then I started volunteering at zoos and was just super interested in birds. And I had a bunch of coworkers who were super into birds as well, so it kind of helped me build that interest. And then I came to the aviary, and I have not left. So. And then in terms of training, working with the birds, just kind of getting experience working around birds and animals in general in zoos. And then I do have a degree in zoology as well that were provided. I don't think there's any individuals. I'm not sure if in terms of breeding, there's any species that were still provided. We definitely don't have any that are old enough to be around from then, but I'm not sure in terms of species. We do still have peacocks on grounds. I don't know if they're ones that are related to the ones that were originally on grounds or not, but.
Great questions.
Yep.
I know I personally want to make it there. We did have one more come in, Shea, that's from Elian. Do you know of a good place to find internships?
Oh, there's definitely a bunch of good places to find internships. If you're looking for accredited zoos, so the zoos accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, there's the AZA website. I'm pretty sure you could just look in aza.com. And they have a little jobs tab, and then you can specify it to internships. So that one's pretty good. There's also one, I have to remember how, I'm pretty sure it's AZAA. It's just a different zoo association. And it also lists internships, just not all of the places that are listed there are necessarily accredited. So it's just another place to look.
Great.
Audubon also has internships postings sometimes on our website that you can find under the careers tab. But there's also a question from Frank here, who was wondering if you offer therapy for people who are afraid of birds. I know that I have certainly encountered people who have a deep fear of birds. And I've never had anybody who is happy that they have a fear of birds. They're always wishing that they did not have a fear of birds.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, nothing super specific. There are, as Erin had kind of mentioned in the beginning, there's experiences where you can kind of be more in contact with the birds. So in terms of exposure therapy, there's always that, kind of being in close contact. There's also free flight areas. So even just kind of being around these guys, and kind of letting them have access. In those exhibits, there's never been any sort of encounter where birds are kind of in your personal space. So those are always kind of a good chance to be close to birds, but not necessarily having to interact with them. And then just kind of hanging out and seeing what they're doing all day is always interesting. We do also have our South American pavilion, which gets you a chance to be inside, but the birds are kind of separate. So you can always start there too.
that's good. Zach also mentioned the Texas A&M Job Board, which is great, as are the Ornithology Exchange.
I think there's another question. So birds kind of come from different places, kind of depending on species. Sometimes we do get them from rehab centers. Other times we do shift birds around with other facilities, kind of depending on either breeding recommendations or needs. So it kind of depends. Not all of them are necessarily injured. Our Caspian tern, which Erin also mentioned earlier, she's actually a rehab bird. She was found to not have any injuries when she was going to be released. Like, she was perfectly fine, and then she just never left her rehabbers. So then it was decided she kind of had to live her life out in captivity. So she's not necessarily injured or anything, but she is technically a rehab bird.
Great.
Yeah, that was a good question.
We just have, 1 or 2 more minutes. So if you have any last questions that you're just dying to know the answer of, go ahead and put those in the chat.
Jacqueline, our next month's one question from me to you is, our next one is trivia, correct? So February, we're doing trivia?
Yep, the third Thursday, same time, 7 Mountain Time, and it'll be trivia. And then the next one is in March, will be a story hour, and we'll follow it up with another trivia, and that'll be it for the season. We'll take a summer break, and then we'll get started again in the fall, so September. Begin again.
Great.
I think there was another question. Do you worry about imprinting with the new birds? That is something we do have to kind of be cautious with. That's kind of another benefit for letting the parents rear the chicks. We don't have to worry about them imprinting on us, basically just getting attached to people and kind of used to them. We don't necessarily worry about it with smaller species, but there's definitely species that we're much more cautious with, depending on kind of their living situation and that sort of thing. So especially if they're going to be in an exhibit where they have access to people, we don't want them kind of approaching people. So for example, with those hooded pittas, we definitely don't want them imprinted. So that's something we're cautious about. And there are certain species that are more likely to imprint on people versus others. So it just kind of depends.
Thank
Well,
you so
I think-
much, Shay.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you all for being here tonight. We all arrived here with probably an interest in birds, and it's nice to feel kindred spirit, and we just appreciate everybody showing up tonight and listening and giving Shea and Erin your attention, and super fascinating. So this has been really fun. I hope that folks will continue to join us for the next several months. Lots of exciting stuff coming your way. So, Jacqueline, what else?
I think that's it. Again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Shea. Thank you, Erin. And we'll look forward to seeing you again. I hope you all get a chance to go out to Tracy Aviary and see all these really fun birds. And maybe you'll be there and happen to see Shea or Erin as you're there. So enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone.
Yeah, take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. Thanks, Shea. Thanks, Erin. Appreciate y'all.